The OODA loop is a model of decision-making first described by fighter pilot and theoretician John Boyd. It explains the continuous process of observing, orienting, deciding, and acting one goes through in dynamic situations. The OODA loop was originally used to understand combat, but can also be used to understand law, art, and many other complex disciplines, as it provides insight into the mindsets of others and grounds the observer in human-centric thinking. However, the loop has been misrepresented since its initial description by Boyd. To help set the record straight, let's correct 3 myths about the OODA loop. One myth is that John Boyd discovered the OODA loop during his research of air-to-air combat of the Korean War. While Boyd, himself a combat veteran of MiG Alley with half a kill to his credit, did use the F-86 versus MiG-15 example to explain the OODA loop, its discovery was the result of a different air-to-air competition. The reality is that Boyd discovered the OODA loop after the 1974 lightweight fighter flyoff between the General Dynamics YF-16 and Northrop YF-17. Mathematical models, including the EM theory created in part by Boyd, predicted a close matchup between the two developmental fighters against their Red Team adversaries. However, the YF-16, designed in part by fighter mafia member Harry Hilliker, had soundly beaten the YF-17. Boyd wanted to know why. Interviews with the pilots revealed the YF-16 won in part because of its ability to rapidly lose and regain energy, what they call the button hook maneuver, thanks to its incredible capacity for maneuver, acceleration, and deceleration. Additionally, Hilliker's team made use of several novel innovations, including fly-by-wire controls, a fully transparent bubble canopy, and dogfight-friendly cockpit layout. These features enabled YF-16 pilots to operate at a faster tempo than their opponents. They could defend when they needed to, attack when they wanted to, and ship between the two states with ease. These one-sided matchups led Boyd to coin the term fast transient, or a system capable of performing quick, irregular changes in energy states to negate an enemy's power to act. This realization, that initiative is more important than energy states, led Boyd to move beyond EM theory and begin researching the OODA loop. While his theorizing began with the debriefings of the pilots who disproved his theory, Boyd would test and improve the OODA loop by examining biology, mathematics, military history, and a host of other topics. In summary, Boyd's examinations of Korean War dogfights served to test the hypotheses he developed following the lightweight fighter flyoff. If you have heard of the OODA loop before, you may have seen this, the simple, cyclical model of the loop. However, the real OODA loop is far more complicated and far less linear than the simple loop can display. This is the expanded loop, a little more complex, huh? It consists of 4 phases but of 5 parts. Part 0 is the organism's environment, or its context. All organisms rely on their environment for sustainment and survival. While interactions with the environment can lead to an organism thriving, isolation from its environment will lead to an organism's collapse. The first O stands for observation, or the process of seeking information and receiving stimuli from one's environment through senses. Inputs are then processed during the most important phase, orientation. During this phase, the organism, with its own values, biases, knowledge, and other attributes, processes the raw information into actionable intelligence. This process data informs the decision phase, where the organism creates hypotheses about its environment and the effects of change. Lastly, the A stands for act, the phase where the organism will reach out to change its environment to test hypotheses, prompting new changes that must be observed, oriented to, and so on. However, there are cases where elements of the loop do not follow this linear pattern. Changes in the environment or within the organism itself could force it to reorient to a new context, interrupting the flow of the loop. Every phase after observation can also provide feedback, creating new observations without environmental interactions. If an organism is cut off from its ability to act or create proper observations, it can fall into feedback loops. However, if an organism develops conditioned responses to stimuli, also called Fingerspitzengefühl. It may go directly from observing information to acting on it. Likewise, organisms guided by outside influences might also skip the decision phase of the loop. It is important to note that these statements apply not only to individuals but to organizations as well. For example, the departments within a business or units in an army have their own OODA loops that help form the larger organization's loop. Think about the reaction time of a combat unit or business storefront to local events versus that of the organization's high-level leadership. In short, the OODA loop is not a linear process, but a complicated system of processes that can be interrupted or skipped as the organism makes its decision. Finally, there is the myth that the OODA loop is all about speed, or the idea that having a faster OODA loop means you simply operate at a faster pace. While speed may be a factor, the ability to create effective change is what really matters. For example, a stationary minefield might have a greater effect on the campaign than the convoy of fast vehicles racing towards it. Remember, the heart of what the OODA loop tells us about conflict is that an organism's ability to survive and thrive is dependent on its capability to adapt to change. To use two examples from patterns of conflict, let's look at the Mongols' victorious maneuver warfare campaign in Transoxiana versus the United States' disastrous counter-guerrilla campaign in Vietnam. In Transoxiana, the Mongols fought a successful maneuver warfare campaign against the KHWAREZMIANs. They used a strategy of attritional and positional warfare to protect their major cities from Mongol attacks. This highly sedentary strategy allowed the Mongols to use mobility, coordination, and surprise to outmaneuver and overwhelm the KHWAREZMIAN forces, leaving the now isolated cities of Transoxiana vulnerable to attack. In other words, Genghis Khan's use of speed was effective because it subverted KHWAREZMIAN centers of gravity before they could react. However, the United States' use of speed during the Vietnam War was not successful because it did not effectively target the Viet Cong centers of gravity. While coalition forces could use speed to bring firepower on a tactical level and outmaneuver the guerrillas on an operational level, they failed, with some exceptions, to take the initiative on the strategic level. Mentally, the U.S. military was prepared to fight a physical war, while the Viet Cong were prepared to win a moral war. As a result, U.S. measurements of success, namely number of enemies killed and tonnage of supplies destroyed, ignore the real theater of guerrilla war, public opinion. This allowed the Viet Cong to steadily erode public support for the Republic of Vietnam while growing its own power base, regardless of coalition victories on the battlefield. To put it bluntly, these examples demonstrate that victory means creating change in and adapting to the conflict environment better than your opponent. While speed may be a factor, the speed at which organisms can create effective change is what matters, not speed overall. You may get inside an opponent's OODA loop by speeding up to outpace them, but it may also be effective to slow them down to below your tempo. In this video, I've debunked several myths about John Boyd and the OODA loop. Well, so what? The idea of the OODA loop and Boyd's legacy are at a crossroads. More and more organizations are using his ideas to affect change in the world. However, many of these ideas have been misrepresented, as the appearance of the simplified loop demonstrates. The number of critics and cynics seeking to disprove and devalue Boyd's work has also risen, casting shadows on an otherwise fruitful set of ideas. If we want to use Boyd's ideas, or discredit them, or debate them, we must have a solid foundation to grow from.